The military's role in shaping a nation's trajectory can profoundly influence its political and social fabric. In South Asia, the Pakistan Army and the Indian Army present a stark contrast in their historical and political engagements. While the Indian Army has largely adhered to its apolitical mandate since independence in 1947, the Pakistan Army has repeatedly intervened in the country's political sphere, becoming a dominant force in government and decision-making. The divergence in their paths stems from distinct historical and institutional factors. Pakistan's founding years were marked by political instability, weak civilian leadership, and external security threats, particularly with India over Kashmir. These conditions created a power vacuum that the military, with its organized structure and resources, readily filled. From the imposition of martial law by General Ayub Khan in 1958 to the coups led by General Zia-ul-Haq and Pervez Musharraf, the Pakistan Army has frequently justified its interventions as necessary to prevent chaos and ensure national stability. The British Indian Army, divided between India and Pakistan during independence, came into being after the 1857 uprising, the First War of Independence. It was one of the pillars upon which Britain's world empire rested. After 1857, the British colonial administrators reorganized and restructured the British Army in South Asia, which meant a change in the military from East India Company to imperial rule, and its recruiting practices, especially the development of the theory of martial race, where Jats, an ethnicity in India and Pakistan, divided into Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh religious identities. Gurkhas and Rajput were identified as martial races and inducted in erstwhile British India Army. After the 1857 rebellion, the British recruiters avoided enlisting soldiers from Bengal and the United Provinces and started to recruit from Western Indian provinces, especially the 4 districts of Punjab, which had largely remained loyal to the British at the time of the 1857 uprising. Punjab, with 56% Muslim population, supplies 54% of the total combatant troops in the British Indian Army if the Gurkhas are excluded. The Punjab contingent amounts to 62% of the whole. Due to the concentration of armed forces from West Frontier provinces, mostly Muslim-dominated areas, B.R. Ambedkar argues that India stood to benefit from a separate Pakistan. For one thing, most of the subcontinent wealth is predominantly Hindu India, which makes Pakistan, with its poor resource base, a weak state. For another, the Indian Army would no longer be dominated by Muslims, as the British had drawn most of their manpower from a district that would become Pakistan, and its primarily Hindu civilian government would not be vulnerable to the army. A safe army is better than a safe border. Ambedkar correctly observed, Pakistan has always lacked the industrial base to sustain a modern army, let alone the technological capacity to develop a modern air force or navy. Yet historical circumstances have enabled its predominantly Punjab army to dominate Pakistan politics. Meanwhile, India's highly pluralistic officer corps remains both apolitical and professional. During the independence decade of the Indian subcontinent, the Constituent Assembly of India ratified the constitution and formed a political order. On the other hand, Pakistan not only struggled to ratify a constitution, but also struggled to hold a democratic election, which showed its institutional weakness and later led to military coups. Contrary to India, Pakistan had only one leader, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. After the death of Jinnah, no leaders could take the responsibilities, rather everyone went for personal gain. On the other hand, Pakistani bureaucrats were mainly Muslims. They were less in numbers and not trained well. On one hand, the bureaucracy was struggling. On the other hand, the political institution was finding hardship to form a government or ratify a constitution. There were no organized institutions other than the army, which had 100 years of history, which made the military a very powerful institution of Pakistan. Pertinently, of the 4 provinces of current Pakistan, namely Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, its military inherited about 29% of the total strength of the British Indian Army, who were predominantly Punjabis. After the death of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Pakistan was governed by Liaquat Ali Khan, who was born into a family of landed elites in erstwhile British Punjab. It is also critical to note that he was a person of finance, and his policies greatly benefited the landlord elites. The policies of land reforms that came into the reign of General Ayub Khan and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto were somewhat used to sustain the grip of landlords over the lands, considering the ratio of population density in South Asia. For comparison, the upper limit of landholding after the reforms during General Ayub's time was 500 acres of agricultural land. In India, it differed in different states, ranging from 5 to 25 acres of irrigated land. So the army always gets support from the elite class, thus most generals remain from the elite class of Punjab. As mentioned earlier, Punjab claims most of Pakistan's National Assembly seats. Punjab, Rawalpindi, is also the center of the military, where this politics generally operates. The bureaucratic military alliance within the deep state operates from here. It is essential to note that after Pervez Musharraf's reign ended in Pakistan, all 4 of its army chiefs after him were of Punjabi origins. Current Pakistan Army Chief General Asim Munir is of Punjab descent. Before that, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, who headed the Pakistan military for about 6 years, was also a Punjabi person by origin. Bajwa superseded 4 lieutenant generals to gain the chief's post. The same story goes on with General Rahil Sharif and General Ashfaq Pervez Kayani, who were both of Punjabi origin. Interestingly, all these officers come from second-generation families serving Pakistan's military, showing the excellent patronage network that has been built over the years by its deep state. Thus, from the beginning, the Pakistani government gave importance to its army and increasingly relied on this institution, even in governance matters. In 1948, Prime Minister Zia-ul-Haq Khan said that the defense of the state is our foremost consideration. It dominates all other governmental activities. In 1951, he appointed Army General Ayub Khan to become the country's defense minister, which meant the relinquishment of civilian supremacy over the military. After Zia-ul-Haq Khan was assassinated, President Sikandar Mirza, a Sandhurst-educated and former general, abrogated the constitution, removed civilian government, banned political parties and political activities, and appointed General Ayub Khan as Chief Martial Law Administrator. Just 3 weeks later, General Ayub Khan replaced Mirza and declared the first coup and began Pakistan's long subsequent history of military rule. Pakistan had from the beginning weak institutions. Its political leaders had little mass support in that region, and the leadership had relied heavily on feudal and merchants for their support, and in return, they sought to safeguard their interests. The military was seen as a strong institution, and the state began increasingly to rely more on its support, not only during natural crises such as floods, but also to run administration and to establish law and order. It is due to this that Pakistan, on the issue of land inequality, just paid lip services to land distribution, but in fact never really attempted to carry out land reforms and minimize the power of the landed gentry in the rural areas. Furthermore, all developmental funds were given to big landowners, and these so-called developmental funds strengthened the economic power of landlords. For its revenue needs, Pakistan relied on either indirect taxes or U.S. aid, and this further undermined the country's sovereignty. The military since the 1960s acted to defend the U.S. interests and its generals to the U.S. than to defend the country's sovereignty. Pakistani generals saw themselves above the law. To achieve these, the military consistently interfered in politics and made sure that the political institutions never became independent, and the political parties remained weak and always relied on the army for their survival. To understand the grip of the military on power politics, we must analyze the period soon after the country became independent. The new country faced military insecurity vis India, and from very early on it joined anti-communist forces in the region by joining Cold War military alliances, which empowered and strengthened the military and brought it close to the U.S. Contrary, Indians joined the non-alignment movement. This laid down the future track on which civilian and military would develop. Thus, since its inception, Pakistan has invested hugely in the military by allocating 60% of the annual budget to the armed forces. From the early years, over-reliance on the military has had serious consequences for the process of political institutions and economic development. As the country established the pursuit of security vs. India as its top priority, this resulted in claiming a large chunk of the state's scarce resources that otherwise could have been spent on other national economic goals. And the military got relative autonomy from civilian oversight under the pretext of secrecy needed to defeat the enemy. Even after the military left formal power, it still maintains its political and strategic influence. To understand this, we have to see that many military officials were appointed, but the military did not hierarchically take over direct control of the state. In Pakistan, post-military period, we see no military council of ministers, and no reserved parliamentary seats for military officials, as in the case of Indonesia under Suharto or Chile under General Pinochet. Moreover, the military has deeply penetrated the civilian economy, building itself vast business corporations spanning real estate, cargo, oil and gas, fertilizers and cement, and now planning to acquire lands for agro-business by attracting foreign capital. This, rather than providing solutions, would undermine the environment overuse water resources and displace farmers from their livelihoods. The military is involved in the acquisition of land for real estate to provide their retiring officers with residential lands. Military officials often own several land plots and sell them or rent them to civilians. This has become a common practice and can be seen in most of the urban areas in Pakistan. In the wake of the Pakistan War, no one thinks that the military, with its lucrative business interests and self-interests as the backbone holding together a beleaguered democracy, will cede power anytime soon. Moreover, the military officials, after retirement, join private companies, as companies find them very useful to get work done more effectively, and their influence is seen as an asset to expand their business empire. For instance, real estate agent Mr. Malik Riaz, in a matter of just 2 decades, has multiplied his wealth enormously and openly said that the reason for hiring retired army officers to support my businesses and to expand his businesses. The Pakistan Army's first intervention into politics was as early as 1958, led by General Ayub Khan, who abolished the constitutional regime established by the 1956 Constitution. The appointment of Ayub Khan as Chief Martial Law Administrator was not surprising, but rather an anticipated outcome among domestic civilians. During Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan's tenure, Ayub Khan was appointed as the Commander-in-Chief to ease tensions between India and Pakistan over the Kashmir issue. The Kashmir conflict dates back to the partition, which stipulated that Muslim-majority areas would join Pakistan. However, India secured Kashmir's accession, sparking protests from Pakistan. Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru assured Liaquat Ali Khan that the Kashmiri people would decide their future through a plebiscite. India and Pakistan failed to reach an agreement on Kashmir, engaging instead in mutual blame. Liaquat Ali Khan, favoring peace talks, advocated for a ceasefire with India. This stance led to conspiracies among high-ranking Pakistani officers who opposed peace and sought war over Kashmir. Amid these tensions, Ayub Khan worked to reduce hostilities with India and prevent officers from overthrowing the civilian government. The 1951 Rawalpindi conspiracy, a military coup attempt, was thwarted, resulting in the imprisonment of senior military officers, journalists, and poets. Nonetheless, Liaquat Ali Khan was assassinated during a public meeting in Rawalpindi in 1951. After Liaquat's death, a series of political appointments ensued, which in hindsight were detrimental to Pakistan's administration. From 1951 to 1958, Khwaja Nazimuddin, an Urdu-speaking Bengali, served in office but was dismissed by Governor-General Ghulam Muhammad in 1958. He was replaced by Muhammad Ali Bogra, who served from 1953 to 1955. In 1954, Governor-General Ghulam Muhammad dissolved the First Constituent Assembly following the Muslim League's defeat in East Bengal. The Second Constituent Assembly, dominated by West Pakistani members, was later formed. In 1955, Prime Minister Muhammad Ali Bogra was replaced by Chaudhry Muhammad Ali, a West Pakistani civil servant, and Ghulam Muhammad was succeeded by President Iskandar Mirza. Mirza later proposed martial law to Ayub Khan. Between 1950 and 1958, Pakistan had 7 prime ministers and 1 commander-in-chief, highlighting the political instability of the era. Continuous infighting and unrest between political leaders, exacerbated by the parliamentary system's shortcomings. For instance, in March 1958, East Pakistan's Chief Minister Ataur Rahman Khan failed to pass a budget, leading to the dismissal of his ministry. This cycle of dismissals, including changes in governors and ministries, fueled calls for military intervention. The political instability was compounded by economic crises. By 1958, Pakistan faced severe economic challenges, including scarcity of goods, rising prices, food shortages, financial indiscipline, and deficit financing. The treasury was depleted, and foreign exchange reserves were critically low. The first 5-year plan was delayed until 1958, when smuggling, black marketing, and hoarding dominated the economy. Ayub Khan justified the imposition of martial law by citing security threats from India and internal unrest, which he argued made Pakistan vulnerable. The reliance on the military to address crises, both internal and external, combined with ineffective political leadership and economic decline, paved the way for military dominance. Analysts argued that the military's ability to restore law and order and promote economic stability increased public support, diminishing the perceived necessity of democratic institutions. The subsequent political and economic developments under Ayub Khan's rule underscored the military's growing influence in Pakistan's governance. Subsequently, the military would stage 3 coups in October 1958, July 1977, and October 1999. In the first military coup, Pakistan President Iskandar Mirza abrogated the constitution, declared martial law, and appointed General Ayub Khan as chief martial law administrator. Days later, Ayub Khan overthrew Iskandar Mirza. Since this incident, the army in Pakistan has always been in control. Under Ayub Khan and Yahya Khan, Pakistan was under military rule until the loss of the 1971 war, which was the biggest setback for the Pakistani army. With the adoption of a new constitution in 1972, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto became the first Prime Minister of Pakistan. Though democracy did not last long when General Zia-ul-Haq took power in a bloodless coup and ruled under martial law. But under Zia, Pakistan Army expanded its presence in the administration with increasing military involvement in wide-ranging administrative activities, from managing essential services and monitoring state-owned schools to conducting the census and building non-military roads. Today, the military under democratic governance has wider and deeper participation in civil administration than it had during the martial law regime. For the third time in 1999, General Pervez Musharraf took over Pakistan and declared himself the President of Pakistan. To tighten the control of the army over the political parties, Musharraf established the National Accountability Bureau, Pakistan's apex anti-corruption organization, which is usually run by former military personnel, to ban opposition leaders from participation in parliamentary elections under allegations of corruption. To maintain power over security policy and ensure a strong budget for the military, Musharraf created the National Security Council, which comprises the chiefs of all military services and is in charge of making decisions about defense and national security policies to increase the military's role in policymaking in Pakistan. Pakistan provides an example of how the military has been able to govern the country as successfully as a civilian government. To justify its existence, it kept the Kashmir issue and invasion threat from India, where a strong army was considered a necessity for the existence of the country, along with the ideology, which has been repeatedly advocated by every Pakistan army chief, is Islam, which acted as a national unifier and garnered support in the endless conflict with India, of course, of which they lost all. Ultimately, ended up disaster for them.